They weren't supposed to die like that. 15 young men, one by one, fell to the floor of a Pennsylvania seminary. Their bodies twisting, fingernails blackened, mouths spewing broken Latin that mocked the very God they came to serve. Church called it consumption. But the doctor who saw their eyes, he fled that same night and never spoke again. Ask yourself, what did he see in their blood that made him burn every note, every record, and disappear? Now listen carefully. This story has been buried for over 200 years, locked behind pulpits, rotting wood, and carefully chosen silence. But the seals are breaking. You're about to descend into something the church never wanted you to understand, because if you do, you'll never see faith, obedience, or death the same way again. In the winter of 1823, Whitmore Seminary was the pride of the Presbyterian Church, an isolated institution in western Pennsylvania, built to train the next generation of God's soldiers. It was a place where scripture was law, prayer was routine, and discipline was sacred. 43 students lived and studied there, young, obedient, devout, each one chosen, each one molded to lead the frontier in holy truth. But what none of them knew, what not even their headmaster, Dr. Cornelius Ashford, dared to believe, was that they were walking into a theological meat grinder, a machine cloaked in religious ritual, but infected with something much older, much darker, and not of man. Thomas Milliken was the first. His body bent backward violently, the tendons in his neck nearly snapping. His eyes rolled white. His lips uttered words that sounded like Latin, but not the kind spoken in any church. Dominus viscum, infernum, corpus diaboli anima peritita. He kept repeating it, his voice a demonic blend of scripture and mockery. What followed was a cascade of identical deaths, 15 young men, all bright, all devout, all erased. Their fingernails black, their blood thick, their voices echoing. Phrases no seminarian should even know. The church said, close the seminary. Bury the bodies in unmarked graves. Burn the records. Blame tuberculosis. But a single survivor, David Crane, left behind letters they never meant for us to see. Letters that speak of strange dreams, blasphemous rituals, and a test hidden inside the seminary walls. A test not of knowledge, but of spiritual infection. And now you're about to read what no minister would dare preach from the pulpit. What was inside those boys wasn't sickness, waiting. The seminary was never just a school. That's what you have to understand first. From the outside, it looked holy stone walls, psalm singing, young men walking cobbled paths beneath towering oaks with scripture in their hands. But behind the order, behind the discipline, was something else. Something older than Presbyterianism. Something that waited in the soil, in the stone, in the silence. Whitmore Seminary had been built on land, donated by the Millbrook family wealthy. Landowners whose lineage traced back to the earliest colonial settlements. But what few knew was that Millbrook land had been the site of a vanished indigenous settlement. One that early European settlers described in their journals as a place of whispers and inverted trees, a place where nothing grew quite right. Animals avoided the streams, where men went missing and came back wrong. Dr. Ashford never questioned the land. He was a man of the Enlightenment, a rational theologian who believed in providence and the firm hand of order. He built his seminary like a fortress of purity. Sometimes, purity is the most dangerous lie. By the fall of 1823, things were already beginning to unravel. Students reported vivid dreams, visions of fire inside the chapel, of voices beneath. The library floor of shadowy figures standing at the foot of their beds whispering scripture. Backwards. First, Dr. Ashford dismissed these as spiritual trials, tests of faith. He told the boys too fast, to pray harder, to confess any impure curiosities. Believed darkness was best dealt with by obedience. But darkness doesn't obey. It watches. It waits for opportunity. The faculty noticed strange patterns, 2 books misplaced, candles extinguishing without wind, pages of student journals torn out and burned in the fireplaces without explanation. Professor Hartley once found every Greek New Testament in the a library marked with a black circle over the book of Revelation. Then came the death of Thomas Millikan, and everything cracked. You must understand something vital. Thomas wasn't just a student. He was a questioner, read more than what he was assigned. He asked about contradictions in the scriptures. He wondered aloud about apocryphal books about the Gnostic Gospels. Is the Gospel of Judas, even the Book of Enoch? He asked the wrong questions, and something listened. When his convulsions began, when his fingernails blackened, when his mouth turned to Latin curses no student should know, he wasn't possessed. He was marked like a candle lit in a tomb. His death wasn't the beginning of disease. It was the result of exposure. Exposure to what? That's what they burned the records to hide. But David Crane's letters reveal something they couldn't destroy. And in those pages lies the map. By the morning of December 4th, a quiet dread had settled over Whitmore Seminary. Students walked the halls without speaking. Psalms were mumbled without conviction. The air itself seemed heavier, like the weight of something ancient pressing down from the rafters. Thomas Millikan's body was removed before sunrise. No funeral, no final prayer. Just wrapped in linen and buried behind the chapel beneath. A frozen patch of earth, no name, no marker, as if he'd never lived at all. The official cause was recorded as consumption, but everyone knew that was a lie. David Crane didn't sleep that night. In his letter, written in trembling script and hidden behind a loose floorboard, he described what he saw through the dormitory window for faculty members Yashford, Hartley, Sterling, and a man he did not recognize standing around Thomas's shallow grave with torches. They were chanting, not praying chanting. The syllables didn't sound like Latin, or Hebrew, or Greek. They sounded older, wet, like earth speaking. That same night, a second student fell sick. Samuel Brewster, healthy, strong, cheerful. The kind of man who never missed chapel and could split wood in the snow without a coat. But now he lay twitching in his cot, his eyes darting wildly under the lids, whispering the same phrases Thomas had screamed the day before. David wrote, "It's not a plague. It spreads like fear. It watches for weakness, and it knows our names." Professor Sterling called for silence. He gathered the remaining students and told them this was a moment of trial, a test of God's servants. But then he said something strange. The righteous will be preserved. The unworthy will reveal themselves. That was when the division began. Students turned inward. They stopped trusting each other. They began confessing imagined sins just to prove their innocence. Some accused others of harboring forbidden texts or engaging in unholy practices. One student, James Morrison, even claimed he had seen Sarah Ashford walking the chapel at midnight, her eyes open but unseeing, whispering the names of the dead. Worse still, strange symbols began appearing on dormitory walls etched into wood.
Scratched onto stone, drawn in chalk under beds.
Always the same 3 lines. A triangle, inverted. Inside it, a vertical slash. The mark of something watching. Dr. Ashford claimed it was student vandalism, but Professor Hartley said nothing. His hands shook during lectures. He no longer looked anyone in the eye. And on December 7th, the third body was found. Still warm, still twitching. The seminary was no longer a place of learning. It had become a trap, a spiritual experiment, a machine built to extract something ancient. When Emma Richter opened her eyes, the world seemed to change around her. Not because she said anything, because she didn't. Her silence was louder than speech. For days, the doctors tried to get a response. They spoke in German, in Latin, in whispers, in shouts. But Emma never spoke. She simply stared. What they saw in her eyes unsettled them. There was no fear, no confusion, no pleading.
Just
observation. Cold, clinical observation. As if she were the one studying them. Some described it like standing before a mirror that reflected not your face, but your soul. One nurse quit after just a few days. She claimed Emma had smiled at her thoughts. Emma was moved into isolation. And from that room, something strange began to happen. Animals wouldn't go near the building. Cats hissed at the walls. Birds stopped nesting near the windows. The staff, once calm, began reporting headaches, nausea, even hallucinations. One orderly claimed he heard Emma speaking in a voice that wasn't hers, in a language he couldn't describe but somehow understood. Another, more disturbingly, said he dreamed of her face every night until he gouged out his own eyes to escape her gaze. It wasn't possession. It wasn't hysteria. Whatever this was, it operated on a level the human mind wasn't designed to process. And then came the symbols. Emma began drawing. Not with pencils or chalk, but with her fingernails. Into the walls, onto her own skin. Geometric shapes, spirals, star charts that predated known astronomy. One physician, Dr. Wilhelm Voss, traced the designs and matched them to patterns found in Sumerian ruins. But Emma had never left the village. The villagers knew nothing of Sumer. These weren't just drawings. They were transmissions. Some claimed they were blueprints. Others, maps. But one linguist who studied her etchings had a breakdown and screamed, "These aren't meant for us." And maybe that was the point. Maybe Emma wasn't communicating with us at all. She was reaching outward. Never blinked. That's what made the townspeople so uneasy. Not her silence. Not the way she stared off into things no one else could see. It was her eyes wide, unblinking, unnervingly still. When the doctor tried to examine her for signs of seizure, her pupils didn't respond to light. But she wasn't blind. She saw everything. She saw things people didn't speak of. One night, after a particularly violent thunderstorm, something changed. Emma's father, an otherwise hard and skeptical man, stumbled into town barefoot and raving. Claimed Emma had spoken, but not in any human tongue. Her voice was metallic, he said, like a gramophone from hell, spitting out a language he couldn't understand but somehow felt. Her mother fainted. Her little brother wouldn't sleep in the house anymore. A priest from Boston was summoned. Not a local one, someone from outside, someone trained in exceptional phenomena, according to the letters. His name was Father Bennett, and he brought with him 3 trunks full of ancient books, relics, and something wrapped in lead. He only met Emma once. After that meeting, he locked himself in his room at the boarding house and scratched symbols into the walls with his fingernails. He refused food, whispered to something that wasn't there. On the 3rd night, he walked calmly into the forest and was never seen again. When the family tried to burn the books he'd left behind, wouldn't tea catch fire? The pages blackened but never curled. Emma just stood there, watching, unmoved. That was the moment it became clear. She wasn't just different, she was inhabited. There was something inside her that defied the natural order. Something old. Something watching through her eyes, whether it was benevolent or malevolent. Well, by then, it no longer mattered, because it had already decided what came next. When the townsfolk woke on the morning of May 3rd, 1873, the Richter cottage stood silent. The usual smoke from the chimney was absent. A sound of the rooster, though Emma skipping past the bakery window, humming her favorite hymn. By noon, unease had settled into dread. Sheriff Donovan was the first to break the door down. What he found inside is still whispered about by the few remaining descendants of Bainesville. The dining table had been set for 3, yet no food was present. The chairs were pushed back, as if the diners had risen quickly. But it wasn't the absence of the Richters that disturbed the sheriff. It was what was left behind. Emma's doll lay face down in the fireplace, partially burned, one glass eye melted. The family Bible was open to the book of Revelation, single phrase underlined in red ink, "And the child shall be taken, and none shall find her." Above the fireplace, carved into the wood with what looked like a knife, was a single word. Returned, no blood, no bodies, no struggle, just emptiness and symbolism. Within 24 hours, search parties were dispatched. The woods behind the property were combed for days. Dogs picked up Emma's scent at the edge of the marsh, but it vanished near an old stone well, one that predated the town itself. Locals believed it was cursed. sealed decades earlier after two children vanished there in 1811. When they lifted the rusted lid, there was no water, only a foul-smelling darkness and the echo of something breathing. People began locking their doors at sundown. Ministers warned of spiritual warfare. Parents clutched their children close. But what made things worse, what made them snap, was the letter. 10 days after the Richter family vanished, a letter arrived at the mayor's office. No name, no return address. The handwriting was shaky, childish. It read, "I have been taken far from the land. I am with the others. They speak through me. Now, do not look." It was signed Emma. The ink had not faded. But when the sheriff held the letter to the light, there was a dark red fingerprint, not of a child, but something inhuman. And yet no one ever heard from the Richters again, not officially. But behind closed doors, some say Emma still speaks through the dreams of those who sleep too close. To the old well, it wasn't until 1932, decades after the building was condemned, that a hidden compartment behind a crumbling fireplace revealed something that should have changed history. Lodged inside a brick cavity was a decayed leather ledger, sealed with wax, bearing the initials E.G., the same initials that appeared on old blueprints and abandoned church archives. Edward Green, the original minister. But this wasn't. A church record. It was a list. Names, dates, and coded phrases, stretching back to 1883. Every name listed had a red X beside it, and every entry coincided with a known funeral held in that church. But here's the twist: most of the names never appeared in any local death records. In fact, some of the people were known to have moved away, gone missing, or simply vanished. No bodies, no graves, no official cause of death. Investigators tried to decipher the coded phrases written alongside each name. One phrase kept repeating, "Echo received." Some said it referred to a ritual. Others believed it was the church's twisted confirmation that a subject had been processed. Processed for what, though? By now, people began to question whether this was a church at allure, something far more sinister. The ledger was quietly taken by a historical society and then mysteriously lost. No scans, no copies, no photos were ever made public. A former church janitor, aged 94 at the time, confessed just before his death that place was never built for God. They buried things, but not people. This statement shattered what little normalcy remained in public memory. It wasn't a place of worship. What was it? And more importantly, why? Had no one ever shut it down? In the shadow of holy symbols, rituals had occurred that even the Vatican wouldn't acknowledge. The authorities kept calling it folklore. But that ledger? That was evidence. Yes. And someone made sure it vanished. Now, we ask, who were they protecting? When the house was finally emptied, furniture covered in white cloth, clocks stopped, and rooms sealed, the last object to be removed was the mirror in the parlor. Emma Richter's mirror, one she had always claimed spoke to her. Local workers hired to clean out the property refused to touch it. They said it was too cold, not in temperature, but in presence. As if whatever was behind the glass knew it was being disturbed. A man named Josiah Black agreed to remove it. He was a skeptical furniture dealer from Harrisburg. He loaded it onto a cart and took it back to his workshop. That night, neighbors said they heard crashing and screaming. When police arrived, they found Black in the yard, bleeding from both hands, muttering the phrase, "She's not done. She's not done." Inside, the mirror was shattered, but only from the inside out. The room was torn apart, as if something had fought its way out. Weeks later, Black was committed. His notes, scrawled and manic, described a girl with no eyes staring at him through the mirror. She whispered dates. Some had passed, some were yet to come. One matched the day a fire would later burn down a nearby orphanage, killing 12 children. Authorities dismissed it as coincidence. Others began to wonder what was Emma shown in that mirror, and who was showing it to her. From that moment on, no one could deny that Emma's presence had never left. The Richter house sat vacant for years, but the mirror, or what was left of it, was quietly removed by men in black coats with no known affiliation. The shards were packed into lined boxes and driven away. What power did the mirror hold? Was it a window or a cage? The answers were buried, but the warnings remained etched in scorched wood above the parlor fireplace in Emma's own handwriting. Break the glass, and the silence ends. Shadows had begun to speak, and they would not be silenced again. In the weeks after Emma's second disappearance, a letter surfaced. It was unsigned, written in Latin, and found inside the binding of one of her mother's hymnals. Authorities dismissed it as a hoax, but the local pastor who translated it wept openly before burning it in front of the town council. According to the surviving witnesses, the letter described Emma as a vessel born hollow, filled only by the will of those below. More disturbingly, it warned of a cycle every 48 years. The town would be visited by another maiden of light who would vanish beneath the soil, restoring balance to something ancient and unspoken. When questioned, the pastor simply muttered, "She was the third." Decades passed. 1921, 1969, 2017. In each of those years, a young girl from the same bloodline as Emma Richter vanished under nearly identical circumstances. No footprints, no signs of struggle. And always during a thunderstorm that hit it precisely to 13 a.m., the family tried to break the pattern. They moved across states, changed their names, converted religions, but it didn't matter. The blood knew, the earth remembered. It's one survivor, Hime's great-grandniece, who escaped during the 2017 storm, reported seeing what she called a woman made of branches at the foot of her bed. She wasn't speaking, the girl recalled, but I could hear her in my bones. She said, "He who enters never leaves the same." Then she touched my chest, and everything froze. Doctors called it sleep paralysis, but the girl never slept in the dark. Again, the phrase has since become a kind of a cult mantra among online forums obsessed with Emma's case. He who enters never leaves the same. Some claim it's a warning. Others believe it's an invitation. But those who investigate too deeply, they vanish. Or worse, they return different speaking languages they never learned, drawing symbols they can't explain, or screaming for days until they're institutionalized. Emma Richter may have been the first, but she was never the last. And the deeper you go into her story, the more one thing becomes clear. This isn't about Emma. It never was. She was merely the door. And once you walk through her, reality itself begins to blur. He who enters never leaves the same. Say it once. Now look around you. What's changed? It was August 17, 1873, exactly 1 year after Emma Richter had first gone missing. Her mother, gray and withered by grief, sat in the empty nursery. The bed was untouched. The doll was still in the rocking chair. The scratches on the window sill still there. But the house felt different now, cold, final, and silent. That same evening, Reverend Silas Merton received a letter delivered by hand. There was no return address. The paper was yellowed, as if decades old. Inside, written in a hand that could have been Emma's older, unsteady, were 6 words. The door was never for you. No explanation, no signature. Just that the family never recovered. Emma's father lost his mind. Her brothers left town and never returned. The townspeople, once eager to help, now refused to speak of the girl or the hill. It was as if the entire town had agreed and spoken to forget, to bury the truth beneath layers of polite denial and institutional silence. But some things can't be buried. In 1911, a young boy named Joseph Harmon disappeared on the very same hill. He too was found standing at the summit, eyes wide, muttering in a tongue no one could translate. His drawings stored in the local museum bore eerie resemblance to Emma's: a door and a stone wall, a bleeding sun, a girl made of roots, and then silence again. Decades passed. But every 37 years, like clockwork, someone disappears. Today, that hill is fenced off. Government property, they say. No one is allowed near it. Cameras watch every angle. Satellites monitor changes in heat and electromagnetic interference. But if you stand just close enough at the edge of the woods and listen very carefully, you might hear a sound like humming. And if you're unlucky enough to be standing in the wrong place at the wrong time, you might hear a child whisper your name.